The young king, Chukwuma, ruled with tyranny, his anger untamed even by the most innocent child around him. The villagers feared coming close to the palace gates, something they did when the previous king and the king before ruled their kingdom. Soon, the palace guards and staff began to act like their employer, the king. They walked around the village with their shoulders high and raided the village markets, making buyers and sellers scamper as they feared for their lives. The villagers asked their village elders to represent them, hoping to end the villagers' rising fear. Mothers no longer let their children play outside past 5 p.m. Men returned from their farms and businesses earlier than usual, and women were forbidden from going out for extended periods without a male escort. The village elders promised to deliver their messages but never went. They too were scared of the young king's wrath. Soon, the king's tyranny extended to the surrounding villages. Chukwuma would send his henchmen to raid nearby smaller villages and threaten them to pledge allegiance or face death. He would conquer other villages and make them abide by the rules of his land. He made the kings of the smaller villages pay obeisance or have their heads chopped off. In fear, village kings obeyed and let go of their egos rather than render their village destroyed and children fatherless. It was during one of such raids Chima heard about the state of his village and the choices his younger brother, the king, had made as a leader. Rumors began to spread about Chukwuma's intending attack on Obosi village, a place he now called home. Initially, he didn't know what to say or how to react. He didn't even want people to know he was from that village, or the villagers would use him as a scapegoat to teach the enemy village a lesson. He thought about his mother. It had been a while since he secretly visited. The last time, his mother begged him to return home, but Chima refused, saying Chukwuma was power drunk and might kill him if he returned and took his throne as the rightful heir. He had promised to return, but almost got caught as he returned to Obosi village. Since then, he has been careful and stayed away from his village. A week after the first rumor surfaced, another one followed. This time, all the surrounding villages amassed their warriors and fighters in preparation to attack the kingdom of Inri. They had suffered enough and wanted their lives and village back. The few loyal chiefs to the previous king and Chima decided to send spies to search for their real king. Chima, who self-exiled out of fear of his father's wrath, the spies were promised wealth and protection for their families should they find out Chima's hiding place. They were cautioned not to go near him or rouse the curiosity of the villagers who lived where Chima resided. All they need do was find his house, monitor his daily schedule, and return home. Three spies did as they were told and set off in a quest to find their king. They went from one village to another unsuccessfully, fearful of returning home without a positive result. They agreed to seek the help of a dibia. After a few questions from passers-by, they were shown a dibia's lair in the next village they visited. The dibia was a very powerful dibia who could see the distant future, and his loyalty was strongly tied to his king, the ruler of his village. He welcomed the three visitors who looked dusty and emaciated from their constant walks and less food to eat. Sit down, the dibia said, and then he watched them closely. What would you like to ask the spirit? The spies looked at each other, unsure it was a wise decision. One of them spoke. We stop, the dibia said. You must appease the gods before stating your desire. Oh, they said, searching their pockets and bringing out a few coins. They placed them gently on the floor beside the gourd and then looked. The dibia watched them intently. Now, what did you want? We we are on a quest to find our king, the king of Inri, but we haven't been successful in the past 4 weeks. Please, show us where he lives so we can find him. Dibia took some cowries, shook them in his hand, and threw them on the cloth lay on the ground before him. He took a tusk and separated the cowries, nodding as if listening to a silent instruction. The young king lives in a village hidden in a forest. It will take you 3 days to get there. You must go back in the direction you came and count 3 days. The spies glanced at each other, shocked. That means the king isn't far from our village, one of them said, excited. Which village must that be? Please, can you give us a name? The Dibia pointed his tusk in the center of the cowries. Oh, the spies said, dipping their hands in their pockets again and bringing what was left of their money. Please, wise one, this is all we have. Place them where my tusk stands. The spies placed their last coins on the ground and withdrew. The Dibia moved the cowries around, each time pondering, twisting his head sideways and shifting more cowries away from each other. He straightened up and looked at the men. Why do you seek him? The spies looked at each other, surprised at the sudden question. We need we need him to return home and take his rightful place on the throne. He is supposed to be the incumbent king of Inri. The spy who spoke glanced at the other, hoping he didn't give too much information. The Dibia looked at them, searching. Don't worry, your secret is safe with me. Thank you, wise one, the spy said. The village, please. Obosi, you must find him quickly because your village is about to be wiped out in a week's time. Your recent king has stirred up dust he cannot settle until all the surrounding villages have his head on a pike. The spies were visibly shaken by Dibia's revelation. They thanked him and set off on their way to Obosi village. As soon as they left, the Dibia took his hat, put on his shoes, and headed to the king's palace. His loyalty lies first with his king and then his customers. 3 days after a perilous journey through the forest and sleepless nights due to night creatures, the spies were happy to arrive at Obosi village, a village full of lush green plants and its people kind and hospitable. The spies looked around, wondering where to start their search, and then one of the spies whispered, there's an old lady sitting by herself in front of her hut and breaking melon seeds. It's possible she's alone otherwise. Why is she breaking the seeds without her children or grandchildren? The other spies nodded in agreement. Let's pretend to help her and then take shelter in her hut as we search for King Chima. Perhaps we could get free meals and bath, but we must be discreet so the villagers won't suspect us as strangers. And so, the spies approached the elderly woman and told her a story of generosity. They told her that they go around the village helping widows and the elderly. During their discussion with her, they helped to break all her melon seeds and fetched water in all her water drums. The old lady was happy and asked them to spend time with her. She narrated a story of how some of the villagers took advantage of her and sometimes came to steal the few food items she had at home, some of which she sold after harvest from her farm. The spies promised to protect her if she let them stay in her house at night. She was happy to have the protection she lacked since her only son left the village for greener pastures. Every day, the spies picked a spot in the village, sat and watched as the villagers went about their activities. Every day they hoped to spot the prince as the deadline approached for their village to be attacked by angry neighboring kings. 5 days later, the spies sat together, disappointed and fearful for the worst. I don't understand. We've done everything we could, one of the spies said. What are we doing wrong? The other spy said and they sighed. Maybe he's disguised. Maybe we don't know him anymore. Maybe. Wait, the first spy said. Do you remember him with any defects? Hmm, one of his shoulders is higher than the other. Although he wasn't born that way, I think he chose to do that as a teenager. You know, when they change their gaits to entice the ladies. Hmm, tomorrow we try again, and we must approach him and let him know the situation is dire. What if he refuses to come with us? Then he's not fit to be our king, one of the spies said. A true son of the land and a king won't let his people suffer while he hides in another man's land like a coward. Did you ever know why he ran away? One of them asked. No, the other two said in unison. That is something we must ask when the dust settles and he's seated on his throne. The next day, the spies set off again, hoping for a positive result. One stood on the road leading to the only primary school in the village, hoping to catch a glimpse of Chima the king. He had awakened early in the morning and sat under an udara tree along a dusty road. 2 hours later, children in school uniforms began to trek down the road, most of them holding their older siblings' hand as they walked. Among the children, something caught the spy's attention. A man, the same height and build as Chima, walked down the dusty path in worn out slippers. He looked no different from the village youth and he held the hand of a child who seemed to be around the age of 6. The spy made a mental calculation as his heart beat faster. Unsure what gave him the push, he rose off the sandy ground and hurried towards the man. He walked right before him, stopping the man in his tracks. Prince Chima, he said, bending to genuflect, but the Chima grabbed him by the shoulder. Don't you dare, he said. Chima glanced around him, hoping no one saw what had just happened. Our people are dying. Please come back home. We need you. Chima shoved him aside and continued walking to his son's primary school. The spy followed closely, not letting me out of his sight. Daddy, is that your friend? Chima's son asked, but his father said nothing. He recognized the spy and he was one of his father's loyal chiefs. Chima took his son to the school, hugged him goodbye, and headed home. How did you find me? He asked, his voice deep and angry. We traveled for a month to. Why? Chima asked. Our kingdom is under attack. Chima's brow furrowed. How? Where is Chukuma? He is. He has. Your Highness, your brother has ruled with such fierceness he's not only offended the villagers, but he has turned our allies to our enemies. The Dibia who told us about your location gave us 7 days before our name is wiped off the map. Those little villages around us have joined forces to ensure the kingdom of Inri cease to exist. Please, the women and children depend on you. We, your subjects, depend on you to right our wrong. They walked in silence, the spy, hoping to hear him speak something positive. Sorry, I can't help you. I can't jeopardize the lives of the people who depend on me now. You have a king. Let him sort out your problems. But you are our rightful king. Chukuma is only in your place because you left. Chukuma can't handle the responsibilities of a king. He wasn't even trained to be a king like you were. Please, your highness, the chief broke out in tears. You have never been an unkind man nor a coward. Please, we went through a lot to find you. If not for us, the men, please, for the sake of the innocent women and children who can't defend themselves, come back home and be our king, the only king who can end this war. Chima was silent for the longest time. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. Tonight, meet me by the tree under the old woman's house where you are hiding. We leave for Inri tonight, but You must not utter a word of my presence to anyone except those who sent you. The spy bent to genuflect, his heart full of joy, but Chima pulled him by the shoulder. Don't. I'm sorry, Your Highness, the spy said, but, Your Highness, how did you know where we are hiding? I recognized you and followed your every move. I intentionally made myself available before you revealed my identity to the villagers. Thank you, Your Highness, the spy said, slightly genuflecting and walking away from Chima back to the old woman's house. We waited for the other spies to return from their search and told them everything that happened. They were shocked and happy their quest had finally ended with a positive result. Chima returned home and told his wife everything that happened. Although his wife was skeptical and asked why now, Chima insisted it was time to return to his kingdom. He feared his brother might take his life knowing his return meant Chukwuma's dethrone, but he didn't want to be labeled a coward. He told his wife to take care of the house and their son. When the time was right, he would send for them to be by his side. He also told her if he didn't send for them after a year, she must move on with her life and train their son to be a responsible and kind man. His wife wept, cursing the spy who found him. Chima told her to pull herself together and act like the strong and brave woman she was. She wiped her tears, prepared a few things for his journey, and bade him farewell. Her heart heavy with sorrow, Chima went to his son's bed where he slept and placed his hand on his son's head, saying a silent prayer. He embraced his wife and left the house into the thick darkness that enveloped the village. He headed for the spot they had agreed to meet and found the three spies waiting for him. They genuflected. This time, he led them, knowing there was no one watching. He showed them the shortest path to the village. While they walked, they talked about where to accommodate him and how to end the turmoil on their land. An hour later, they arrived at the village. It was eerily quiet with no one in sight, except for a few stray dogs scavenging for food to eat. The oldest of the spies, also a chief, took Chima to the most beautiful room in his house and asked his servants never to touch the door of that room. The next morning, Chima rose from his bed and pulled his curtains apart, feeling the warmth he experienced as a youth in his village. Three silent knocks on the door, and he knew who it was. They had agreed to only answer to anyone with three knocks on the door. Chima opened the door and the chief rushed in. Your Highness, things got worse after we left the village. Your brother, Chukuma, is ill from a mysterious illness, and at the point of his death, there's famine in our land. Our enemies are multiplying, but we have no leader to lead us to war. The chief panicked. There will be no war, Shima said. Send for the Dibia. I've already summoned for him. He said if Chukuma refused to succeed the throne, he would die. How is my mother? She is well, but frail, Your Highness. Chima sighed with relief. He was happy his mother was alive and well enough to see him return to the village as she always wanted. Take me to the palace, Chima said. But, Your Highness, our enemies will find out you are back and they will have a change of heart to destroy my village. Okay, Your Highness. The chief hurried out and returned, ready to take the uncrowned king back to his palace. Chima entered the palace, his eyes staring up as he remembered the last time he walked through the walls when men and women were awake. He felt free, but not until after having a conversation with his brother. First, he went into his mother's room. His mother, out of joy, went on her knees, crying and welcoming him back home. Happy he returned before she eventually visited her ancestors. His mother could barely say much. She urged him to go and see his brother, bedridden and sick. Chima, with apprehension, walked into the king's chamber. On the bed lay his younger brother, Chukuma. He was a shadow of himself. He was emaciated and barely recognizable. Chima sat on a chair beside the bed, inched closer to Chukuma's ears, and said, "Brother." Chukuma's head swung quickly in the direction of the voice. His eyes, although weak, bulged out. "Chima," he said, his voice low. "Is that you?" "Yes, it's me. What have you done to yourself?" "Chima, I I never wanted this. Power, I never wanted it. I don't want it anymore. You can take it. I just want to live again." "Chukuma, you started a war," Chima said, his voice kind. "There's starvation and parents are losing their children. You I'm sorry. They started it. They didn't see me as a king capable of protecting them. So I brought sorrow and pain to them. They turned me into the man I became. I was kind to them in the beginning, but they made a mockery of me." Chima sighed. "I have to right your wrong, but you must give up the throne so I can handle things my way." "The throne isn't mine. It was never mine. You let me go through all of this. Why?" Chukuma said, tears slowly falling on his pillow. "I never intended to leave. Our father did something to me too." Chima stopped. "I will tell you the story when all of this is over." He took Chukuma's hand in his and patted it. "I will take care of you." He rose and left Chukuma's bedside and then summoned for the chiefs in the village. He assigned each chief to take a peace offering to all the villages preparing to war against them. He wrote an individual letter to each king and called for a truce. He begged for forgiveness on his brother's behalf, asked that they draft a peace treaty, and promised as the new king he would ensure peace would be restored to their lands. There would no longer be attacks on their land, and they would trade freely between territories. He put his seal on it and waited. Initially, the kings of the villages were skeptical and deliberated on a day to amass and visit Inri Kingdom without their armies. Chima was happy to receive them. He offered them drinks, apologized for everything that happened while he was away, and promised to restore peace to their lands. The kings were pleased that he had returned and would take over the throne, and because of his kindness and that of his father and grandfather, they forgave Chukuma. Chukuma became well and asked for exile. He was ashamed to walk on the streets as a common man and as a king who failed his people. He gained asylum in a village far away from Inri and started a new life. Barely 2 weeks after King Chima ascended the throne, he sent for his wife and son. They joined him in the palace, and his wife's family were given a royal treatment. A house was provided for them, and they lived well beyond poverty. All the kings in the neighboring villages paid homages to King Chima, a kind and humble king. As his father, Chima trained his son in preparation to ascend his throne should anything happen to him before he grew old enough as his grandfather. King Chima learned a lesson from his father's greed and promised to never play with his son's life to extend his reign. He told his son to never put his trust in anyone, not even if they have the power to change the hand of time to suit his purpose. King Chima's mother lived long enough to carry her grandchild before joining her ancestors. On her deathbed, she made Chima promise to always put the people first before his desires, because in the day of trouble, the villagers are all the armies he needs to defend the kingdom. Hope you enjoyed this conclusion to the first series of The Greedy Prince. In all that we do in life, we must let things occur naturally. If we try to speed up time and events, we may end up losing the beautiful things that await us as we exercise patience. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in my next story world. Bye.